We have the best culture. In our culture, there is no place for a woman.
The brutal gang rape of a 23-year-old girl on her way home from a movie triggered an awakening that took many by surprise.
According to the latest government figures, one woman is now raped in India every 20 minutes.
ज्योति सोती थी तो आँख खींचती थी, तब कहती मम्मी मम्मी।
ताली कभी एक हाथ से नहीं बजती, दोनों हाथों से बजती है। अगर कोई शरीफ लड़की होती है रात को 9 बजे मतलब नहीं घूमती। जितनी 15-20 मिनट गाड़ी चली है मैंने चलाई थी। लाइटें बंद कर दी थी उन्होंने। भाई था मैं, जिस लड़के को मारा था जाके वो सीटों के बीच में छुप गया बस। लड़की चिल्ला रही है बचाओ बचाओ। हमारे को फिर मारपीट के पीछे ले गए, हाथ आ जा रहे थे बारी बारी से ही। जुनैल ने कपड़ा निकालने चक्कर में उसने हाथ डाला, कुछ ऐसी चीज थी अंदर से लंबी लंबी सी निकली थी, अतड़िया ही थी कुछ।
The lady, on the other hand, we can say the girl or woman are more precious than a gem, than a diamond. If you put your diamond on the street, certainly the dog will take it out. You can't stop.
एक ही कलम डालना के मेरे बेटा को भगवान ने जब बुढ़ापा का सारा बना था उठा के खंदा पे जला देगा, उसको हमने देखा जलाते। आखिरी बार जब हम उसको हॉस्पिटल में मिले, उसने हाथ में हमारा हाथ लेके चूमा और बोला कि सॉरी मम्मी, हमने आपको बहुत तकलीफ दिया, आई एम सॉरी।
Hi, I'm Rebecca Evans, and I'm the host of Our Voice, which is a television show that is based in Idaho. We're filming here at the beautiful Grove Hotel in Boise, and we are interviewing Leslee Udwin. She's an award-winning filmmaker and also the creative genius behind India's Daughter. This is a documentary about the brutal rape of a 23-year-old medical student in Delhi, and the student ended up dying because of the injuries she sustained. So we're here with Leslee. Leslee, I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on here.
I am just honored, number one, to meet you. I have to tell you, I've watched clips of this film, and it is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see what's going on. So I want to kind of just take you back to 2012, when news hit about this atrocity, and you know the world was starting to react, because we're hearing about this horrible incident in India. What was your initial reaction when you heard about this story?
Well, Rebecca, I guess my stomach turned collectively with the whole world at the brutality, the hate-filled, heinous details of this rape. But, to be honest, I've heard it before. We all have. There was nothing particularly, sadly, remarkable about the rape itself. What was extraordinary was the response to the rape, what followed in the ensuing days and indeed weeks, because the entire country seemed to mobilize.
Right.
There was this extraordinary outpouring of anger and passion and commitment to change, unprecedented numbers, and there were men and women, and it was so inspiring. I was awe-struck, you know, and I'd never seen such a passionate commitment from civil society for change, to end rape culture and seek justice for women and girls
Well, and I think that's the thing is even the term rape culture that exists. I mean, I want to know that inspiration. I know you have a personal story attached because you yourself were a victim of rape.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we were talking about the statistics, 1 in 5 women. So let's talk about that for a moment and where your inspiration came from. Did that incident for you personally that you experienced, do you think it helped encourage you to pursue this film?
No, to be honest, I never made any correlation
Wow.
between my personal experience, or at least it wasn't to the fore. I wasn't consciously aware that that was motivating me. Of course, subliminally, that experience I had at the age of 18, where I pretty much lost trust for the first time in a very substantial way, I think moted much of what I've done throughout my life, which is always to try to make the world a better place and to regain that trust in humanity. That's been my motivating factor for everything I've done. But this was the first time, actually, that I was addressing the issue of women's rights and the problems that women and girls endure as a pandemic across our world. So I don't think my personal experience had anything to do with really motivating me to go out and do this. It was glimpsing change on the horizon. It was seeing those extraordinary men and women, falling in love with them and their courage, and deciding that I had to use my energies and talents, such as they may be, to amplify their voices. It was my way of joining the protests.
So that was your decisive moment. You
Yes.
decided to take film and give it power to make change.
Yes.
That's so powerful. I read that you filmed the whole documentary, India's Daughter, in India with a film crew that was all Indian. Is that right?
That's right.
I can't imagine the challenges. So what were some of the challenges that you faced just in taking on this endeavor overall, but you're in another country with another crew?
Yes, I had actually filmed a feature film in India before that, so I was kind of inured to the way things are done there, and they are very different. And there is a kind of magical chaos that happens in India. Things sort of fall into place. So I'd experienced that before in a film called West is West. But that was a feature film, which means we were prepped and prepared.
You had control.
Had control. This was a documentary, and it was my first documentary, and the challenges of that are so intense. I mean, I'm in awe of documentarians. It's the most difficult thing to do. You have no idea what you're going to get. You have no idea who will talk to you.
Wow.
And indeed, the struggle to get, particularly 2 interviews for this documentary, which I never got, was one of the toughest and most heartbreaking parts of the experience. But the toughest part of all was that it was like dipping my soul in a bucket of tar and knowing that what you see can't be unseen and what you hear can't be unheard, and that going on this journey into the darkest recesses of the human heart and soul is going to leave its imprint. And I did actually break down during filming. There was one morning, I woke up in my hotel room in Delhi and I was wet from head to toe, and my teeth were chattering. I didn't know it at the time, but in retrospect, of course, it was just a major panic attack. And it had been very shortly after I'd interviewed one of the 7 rapists I interviewed. I interviewed 7 of them over 31 hours, and one of them had raped a 5-year-old girl. And I had left behind a 13-year-old daughter to go and make this film. And that took me over the edge. I think that interview was just too much for me. So I had this total breakdown, and I knew I had to either get into a hospital immediately or get on a plane and go home, but I had to stop this process. I thought I was insane for having started it, and I had to stop it. I called home. I thought my husband would answer the phone because I was just kind of in control enough to be able to work out the time difference between Delhi and Copenhagen, where my family were living at the time. But my daughter answered the phone. It was
And
after
she's
midnight.
13 at the time.
She was 13 and a half then. It was about 6 months into filming. And she should have been asleep, but she answered the phone. And she was just extraordinary. She talked me down off this panic attack. I tried to pretend I was okay and said, "Give me daddy, I need daddy, it's urgent." And she just said, "What is wrong? You tell me what is wrong."
Wow.
And I just broke down and cried and said, "I have to come home, Maya, this is too much for me. I should never have started this. I'm not strong enough to do this." And
Wow.
she started talking me down off the panic attack, made me breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, and then made me get a pen and paper, which I actually pretended to do because there wasn't nearby, and said, "You write down all your problems now, and I want you to start solving these problems. Start with the small problems. Do not start with the big problems, Mummy." And then she said words I will never forget. She said, "And Mummy, you're not coming home because I and my generation of girls are relying on you."
Wow.
And that was it. I stayed
Wow.
and I finished it.
You know, I believe in the power of women empowering women, and that can come from anywhere. I can't imagine as a mother, your daughter empowering you
Yeah.
in a moment like that. And it is so truthful. The generation to come needs this. I know that's one of your passions, is about the education of our youth when it comes to empathy. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. This is now what I've committed myself to. No more films for me until I get all the countries in the world, I hope. That's what I'm trying to do. And there's every reason why they should, to co-opt this new subject onto their national curricula. How can we possibly deem it crucial that maths should be a compulsory subject, but educating the heart of our children,
Right?
educating them in empathy, in respect, in moral values, in perspective taking, in conflict resolution,
Right.
in critical thinking, in compassion, should not be a compulsory subject.
There's an age. We were talking about this. I know you get to university and yes, they're teaching critical thinking, but one of your passions is this needs to start much younger.
It needs to start as young as possible. Now, if we could get into the homes, we would start with the newborn baby and the mother. That's where we'd start. But we've got to be realistic. We can't get into the homes.
Right.
And the parents, of course, for the most part, the majority of parents in the world, are not capable of breaking this cycle of violence that they themselves are carrying forward. They are old learners. What we need to do is get hold of these children and mediate these values to them from the very first moment we can, and that is through the school system. So in the preschool, in the kindergartens, we are designing and constructing a curriculum for the ages of 2 to 7.
Wow.
Where we find 2-year-olds, we will have those concrete, detailed exercises and instruments. We're not reinventing the wheel here. There are glittering, wonderful programs and instruments that exist. We have Roots of Empathy, an amazing program by a visionary, extraordinary woman called Mary Gordon. She is twice OBE in Canada for her astonishing work on empathy, world expert. She's on our committee and we've partnered with Roots of Empathy. So we will take her program in to our curriculum.
Right.
We have partnered with the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, Dr. Mark Brackett, Dr. Robin Stern, visionaries, experts in the field of social emotional learning. So we're like magpies, is how I describe us. You know, we're searching out everything glittering and best practice effective that exists, and we're pulling it together into a comprehensive, detailed curriculum that will teach the education of the heart as opposed to mere education of the head, which is what the schools are doing.
Right.
And how irresponsible have we been with our children to not have done this to date?
Well, and we're seeing that outcome. I mean, we're seeing the outcome on a global level by not doing it.
Correct.
I mean, we talked about the mindset. The thing that appalled me when I was watching the trailer and I was reading about the film that you've done, India's Daughter, I rewound over and over that moment with the lawyer. And I thought to myself, if this is the mindset of the lawyer, how do women get out of these situations? How are they safe ever? How are they protected? And do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because you interviewed, I know you interviewed 7 rapists, but you also interviewed the lawyers as well for this film.
Well, that was a very seminal insight for me, because there was a certain, not moment, but period during my thinking in terms of, you know, how I'm going to structure the film once I had the shooting done, where I thought, okay, what is the commonality here between these 7 rapists? And it hit me between the eyes that 6 of the 7 of them hadn't finished secondary school. So I thought, okay, that's very significant. Only one of them has, you know, been fully educated. But then I interviewed their lawyers. And their lawyers, who had had the highest degree of access to education, were actually worse than the rapists. More entrenched in their misogyny, more extreme and shocking in their devaluation and objectification of women. And it was like a light bulb going off. And I just thought, well, it's nothing to do with access to education. But of course,
it's culture.
It's everything to do with contents of education. So it's culture, it's socio-cultural thinking, it's mindset. The disease here is very straightforward and simple. What causes violence against women and girls and all forms of prejudice and discrimination and abuse is the mindset of gender inequality. That's the disease.
And we've been, like you were saying, we've been putting a bandage.
That's it.
Right?
We have just been reacting to the fallout of the symptoms. The symptoms, which are rape, which are sex selection, trafficking, child marriage, female genital mutilation, all of these are symptoms of the disease. And we have been like nurses, reacting after the fact, putting bandages on the wounds. We need to become surgeons. We need to root out the cause. And it is actually incredibly simply done. And we've been talking about this as a world since 1948, Declaration of Human Rights. But we're not doing it. We're not walking the walk. And that is what this education initiative is all about, actually making a system change in education. And we have to start immediately.
It's changing completely how we think and how we deliver how to teach thinking. And including feeling and thinking, adding the emotional component. You know, one of the things you were sharing with me was the training that you put yourself through to be able to interview the rapists. And I wanted to just talk and explore that a little bit, because you were really worried once you got in front of one of these men, you were gonna just lose it. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, here's the thing. Well, I was raped when I was 18. It was the most traumatic event of my life, of course. My greatest fear was that I would be killed. Now, I'm ashamed to tell you that when I got out of that situation alive, I was so grateful to have gone out with my life. I told nobody about this.
Which is so common.
It's so common. It's the most underreported crime that there is. Also, I remember clearly feeling guilty. Even when there was no one pointing a finger at me and saying, well, you shouldn't have trusted him, or you shouldn't have been wearing what you were wearing.
You somehow were to blame,
I somehow was to blame, because I trusted this guy and he turned out to be a liar and untrustworthy. He told me I was coming to a party. I watched The Hunting Game, and there's a story absolutely the same, and you know, my hair stood on end when I heard it, because it was the exact same, you know, mechanism of luring and entrapping.
Predator luring.
Predator, absolutely. And but I blamed myself for believing him, and thought, well, you should have turned on your heels when you saw that there was nobody else there. You shouldn't have believed him. But we have the right to believe people. We have the right to trust people. I should not have felt in any way responsible. But having not told anyone about it for 20 years, my husband was the first person I told. I was terrified that when I sat opposite these rapists, the ghosts, old ghosts
Right.
might come up, and I had no idea how I'd react. So I thought, bizarrely, I suppose, but actually I think quite sensibly, I thought I'd better practice on other rapists who I don't need for the actual film, so that if I mess up, it's not the end of
That's
the world.
some reactionary training. So when you go in, you're prepared. It's military preparedness, really.
That's
It's-
right. It was that. And one of these 4 I practiced on had raped a 5-year-old girl. And at the end of the interview, 3 hours of hearing every single detail of what
that
he'd
you
done.
can never undo. You've heard it,
Never
and
undo.
you've seen the visions in your head
Yeah,
now.
that's now part of its
of
atoms
who
in
you
my
are.
in my soul now.
Yeah.
I said to him, please help me to understand one thing. I can get to the point with you at which you are wanting to do this. I can encompass that in my imagination. So I can imagine how you are feeling in your body and you're really wanting to do this, and I'm with you up to that point imaginatively. But now you lose me, because now we're looking at a tiny little 5-year-old girl, and you have described her to me so well that I can actually picture her now. So now we're both looking at the same little vulnerable creature of 5. How do you cross the line? Help me. And he looked at me like I was utterly insane for asking the stupidest question on earth.
Right.
And he said, she was a beggar girl. Her life was of no value.
Wow.
Word for word what he said.
Wow.
And, there's a huge insight in that.
Right.
Of course, since the day men are born in the various cultures in the world, because let us not forget, this is not an India-centric problem. This is a global problem.
Right,
It's
right.
only a question of degree and characteristic as to how it's expressed.
And what's accepted in that culture as well.
100%.
Right.
100%. If you're in Saudi Arabia, you can't drive a car if you're a woman, or you'll be arrested
Right.
and imprisoned. So in India, women could say, well, at least I can drive a car. But from the day men are born in India, they are the princes, they are the entitled, they are the powerful. They see their sisters have to eat last at table. They have to wait and eat last. These are the cultural expressions of that mindset.
Right.
And they are ingrained since time immemorial. They have all the expressions like having a daughter is like neighboring your, they have all these expressions like having a daughter is like watering your neighbor's garden. Because the girl is destined to be given away to another family as a domestic slave. That's her destiny.
There's no what is it that the lawyer says? There's no value in women.
Yeah, I mean, the lawyers say so many horrific things. I mean, one of the lawyers, and actually this one you haven't heard yet, but for me it's the most shocking one in the film because it's delivered with such absolute conviction. One of the lawyers says that if his daughter had behaved as disgracefully as the victim
In
India's daughter behaved, now let's put that into context. Disgracefully, she went to see Life of Pi, a 6:30 showing, with a friend who was neither her brother nor her husband. That's what was disgraceful about that. She dared to go out at night.
On a bus,
A public transport bus to get home with her friend. He said, if my daughter had behaved that way, I would take her to my farmhouse and in front of my whole family, I would pour petrol on her and burn her alive. That is what this so-called educated man says and believes.
And defends the criminals.
Yes.
Now I know when you interviewed the rapist, there was a fallout from that. I mean, how did India handle that? They weren't really receptive that you went in and interviewed the convicted rapist.
India
right?
banned the film. I was in such shock. I mean, I had taken real diligent care to show this film to several people, some of them my interviewees. I'd shown the film to the prosecution team to ensure that there would be no prejudicing of there's still a final
that it was truth.
Case to come.
Right.
And that it was balanced, and I wanted to know, of course, how India would respond to the film? Was it powerful enough? Not that I thought that there'd be any controversy about it, because it's a very clear public interest film pleading for a better world for women and girls.
Right.
So I didn't anticipate any controversy at all. You could have blown me over with a feather when they banned this film. And I was in Delhi when they did, and I heard these so-called grown adults in Parliament screaming about their tourist industry being decimated, and that this was a campaign orchestrated to shame India. And of course, the film has as its final exclamation mark these global statistics from countries around the world which roll and are so shocking, which just show it's a pandemic across the world.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's not India specific,
no,
unfortunately.
It's not. It's not.
Now I know that there was talk that you gave the rapists a platform by even interviewing them, right? And you also interviewed the victim's family. And I just wanted to talk about the conflict within you trying to balance out those interviews. How did that work out for you?
Well, the rapists are in the film, I think, for about 8 minutes out of the hour. The parents and many other enlightened, forward-thinking Indian men. Her tutor and best friend is one of the purest-hearted human beings I've ever met. If you look at the film empirically, there are many more examples of actually enlightened men in this film than the opposite.
Right.
So I think it's the shock of hearing, which we seldom hear, the truth of how these men think and what leads them to do what they do. Mm-hmm. That makes it seem that they're even more present in the film than they actually are. But if you look at it empirically, they're not. The balance is not the way it would appear. As for giving the rapists a platform, look, Parliament gives a platform to politicians to say equally heinous things about women. Mm-hmm. This is a nonsense. It's an excuse.
Right.
And how, in God's name, are we ever going to change this behavior and these men without talking to them, without understanding what goes on in their heads?
You have to give it all a voice. I mean, you really have to give everything a voice, because we have to hear their perspective. Like you said, it was so shocking to you to hear the paradigm of a rapist of a 5-year-old validate his behavior, rationalize his behavior. I can't imagine, as I just watched only the trailer so far, it's heartbreaking. It is just so retching to watch this unfold before you. I'm sure I'm changed just from watching that small aspect. What's changed with you? I mean, doing the documentary, all the things that you've seen and heard and experienced through the eyes of another.
Well, of course, I've had, the deepest possible sense of despair. But thank God I have the antidote for me personally, which is a complete conviction in what the solution is. So I actually feel privileged to have gone through that terrible journey of pain and pity, because I've come out of it with insight, with perspective. I've come out of it strong. I've come out of it knowing what it is I have to commit myself to if I want to be a responsible human being, which I do. I mean, I don't see any purpose in living a life other than leaving the world a better place than it was when you entered it. And I know with all my heart that when countries co-opt this, and by the way, I have 28 countries. I just brought the Bahamas on board on Sunday. I have 28 countries committed to bringing this new subject onto their curricula, to educating the hearts of their children for 2 hours a week on a compulsory basis from the first day of entry of the children into school. So I am full of optimism.
Right.
I know we're going to change the world, but we have to. We have
You
no
found
further down to
meaning
go.
in the darkness. I mean, that's really, I think when people try to find healing, even your own personal experience with rape, I think this gives it meaning.
Yes.
it gives it substance to move forward and go, I can take this event and turn it into something good. And I think, you know, you put yourself like in the darkest trenches to capture this documentary and put it out there for the world, but it's the vehicle for change. It is really a vehicle for change. The power behind filmmaking, you know, to give people a visual, because we hear about it, we're reading about it, but to really take that journey and see it is another story.
And it's no coincidence, actually, Rebecca, that the mechanism that does that with film, and why film is the most powerful tool for change that there is because it's empathetic as a medium. Empathy is the most crucial ingredient in all of this. To be able to see the world from another's point of view. And when we watch a film, that is what we do. That's the most generous...
We're almost transported, right?
Completely.
Right there.
We're negating ourselves, we're negating our own pressing concerns and selfish obsessions for that period of time while we're going on a journey with another human being or other human beings and seeing the world through their eyes. There's no greater act of generosity that we can make. And that is what we have to mediate to our children, and not just tell them to do it, but they need to practice it. They need to experience it.
Right, they need to feel it.
That's why it needs to be a subject with its own time, its own respect, its own weight.
Right.
Just as mathematics or any of the numeracy or literacy or STEM subjects are.
Right, right. I think, and you're, you know, the change that's happening from inside of you, from globally what's happening with this documentary being put out there into the world, reaching children. How about those that you interviewed? Do you feel like there was change with them, some of the subjects that were part of the documentary?
I have to honestly say no. I wish I could say that I saw some glimmer of redemption, some glimmer of thoughtfulness. Here's the really worrisome thing, and this is why we have to deal with this on such an urgent basis.
Right.
They expressed not 1 second of remorse in 31 hours because they genuinely don't believe they've done anything wrong.
Right.
And that is what we have to stand up and recognize as a society. When we teach them to hate,
They learn to hate.
they learn hate.
Right.
And they learn that that person, be it a Tutsi who is called a cockroach and a dog by a regime that is preparing the Hutus to annihilate them in a genocide in Rwanda,
Right.
or ISIS, who beheads those who have no value because they are of a valueless religion, or 6 men who gang rape a young woman because she's out after dark and therefore needs to be taught a lesson because she's breaking the dictates of patriarchal society, and she's a woman, so she's of no value.
Right.
We have to listen to that, and we have to take responsibility for this. These are not just rotten apples in a barrel we're dealing with, who we can hang and be rid of. It's the barrel that's rotten. We
Right.
are the barrel. We have taught them these attitudes.
Right.
So we have to address this, and we have to embrace a new education.
Right, and almost rebuild a new barrel, you know, in which
Completely.
we exist. I know, I read somewhere that in India they do not name a rape victim,
Yes.
right, because of the shame that is attached to it, which just appalled me, because I know we talked about reporting rape. It's just so underreported, the most underreported crime. Did that change with the film?
No. Now,
Because it's called India's Daughter, because she was not allowed to have her name.
that's right.
said,
They had
right?
pseudonyms for her. They called her Nirbhaya, Damini, and India's Daughter. Her parents did name her to international journalists, but she had never been named in India. Last December, at the 3rd anniversary of her death, the parents named her for the first time in India,
Wow.
in the media.
So you did make a change there.
Yes,
in
but
a
it's
country
not-
where it's illegal.
But it's not a change that'll sustain, because I
Right.
promise you, nobody else is going to name
A rape victim.
you know, after that example, because the society so unjustly puts the blame on the woman.
Right.
What was she wearing? Has she had sexual relations before? You know,
Somehow
is
it's
she
her
a loose
fault.
girl? It's her fault. And dishonor and shame adheres to the rape survivor or the rape victim. She won't be marriageable after that. The family will experience a sense of dishonor. So there is no way that until the mindset is changed, that won't change.
Right. I know, I mean, the work you're doing it's so humbling to watch from where I'm sitting. And you were named in 2015, New York Times named you the second best women making an impact, right, in history. Angelina Jolie, who's very powerful, was named number 14.
Well, that shows how ridiculous it is.
No, I just want to honor. I mean, I think, you know, what more do you expect to come? I know you're traveling the world right now with this initiative for education of the heart, and that's part of the journey of India's Daughter. I think is just incredible. Do you have more films in mind, or this is part of your journey just to complete the circle?
I have to address the education perspective that I am, filled with. I have to get that done. And once that job is done, however long it takes, I'll be able to think of doing something else. But for now, I'm compelled. I feel this is what I was put on earth for.
Right.
I feel I'm, just a vehicle for it. But I have no choice. It's not like I'm choosing to do good. I'm just doing what I see, what I am compelled by, and what I have to do. I have no choice.
Now, most of us, I mean, we're just mostly ordinary people living ordinary lives, but I think people will see this film, they'll hear about this film, and they'll feel a call to do something. What can your average person do to make a difference? Just your average person that has a busy life with jobs and family.
Well, the most important thing I think that we can all do until such time as we have this new generation of equal thinkers is to call out everything we see that supports a culture, and not just on a gender front, on a religious front, on a racial front.
Any inequality.
Any inequality, anything that underlies, because thinking makes it so. Recognizing the importance of the mindset leading to actions of violations of human rights is a crucial thing to do. It sounds very obvious, but it's utterly crucial. And so giving it that importance means we have to call it out every time we see it. We have to create awareness, advocate. People should band together, show films of this nature, have panel discussions, keep the conversation going. We have a website, www.indiasdaughter.com. In 2 weeks' time, we'll have www.thinkequal.com. That is the education website. Donate. Put on screenings of this film, of other films like The Hunting Ground, Pray the Devil Back to Hell. There are some extraordinary documentaries that keep the conversation going and create awareness, but also advocate with your education authorities and your teachers. Ensure that the programs that already exist, like the Ruler program, Roots of Empathy, Seeds of Empathy, get co-opted onto your schools. As parents, advocate for that.
Right. And as a community.
And as a community.
I think one of the powerful things, you're one of 3 filmmakers that is part of the March Against Violence. That's this Family of Women Film Festival, the 9th annual Family of Women Film Festival. You guys have banded together to make a difference. And I want to, I feel like this show that we're doing, that you're on, thank you for being here, Our Voice, on a very small scale. We're giving a platform to the voiceless, a voice to the voiceless, a vehicle to make a difference. And I'm watching you from a distance, and I'm so humbled and awestruck on what you're doing on a global level to make a difference. And I feel like you have captured this moment in time, India's daughter. You've put her in a time capsule. You've given her life to continue on and a voice to continue on so that it will not be forgotten. I think that is another key component. This is where we've been. We have to acknowledge that. And I want to thank you for your work. I am honored to meet you and to be part of this journey in a very small way and to have this time to interview you and get to know you.
Rebecca, it's really important for me to say, I want to thank you for your work. We are all doing this together. Peggy Goldwyn with her Family of Women Film Festival, Idaho University, who are putting on these films, your fantastic program. It's not a small thing in comparison. It's just we all do. We are grappling with an idea whose time has come. And particularly for women and girls, the time has come because we are at the bottom of the heap of the world's real meaningful focus. The LGBT community is far, far, far more advanced than we are. We're the last of, the bastion of abuse of human rights. Right. And we are all doing it together, and I am in awe of you and what you do.
Oh, thank you.
So really, there's nothing as powerful as an idea whose time has come.
Yeah.
We must all do this together.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for being on this show. And I'm going to follow you. I'd like to follow up with you and see what further changes and how we can further be of support with your journey. I'm so excited to see what's going to unfold and continue to unfold for you with India's Daughter. And thank you for your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.